Okay, welcome everybody on behalf of Holocaust Museum Los Angeles. My name is Michael Morgenstern and I'm an educator at the museum. And this morning I'm pleased to welcome you to our discussion with Engelina Billauer, a Holocaust survivor from Germany. For those of you who have not been to the museum before, Holocaust Museum Los Angeles is the first Holocaust survivor founded Holocaust museum in the United States. Also, for those of you who don't know, we have just officially changed our name from Los Angeles Museum of the Holocaust to Holocaust Museum Los Angeles. In the 1960s, a group of survivors worked together to create a memorial for their loved ones who perished in the Holocaust. And this memorial eventually became Holocaust Museum, Los Angeles. These survivors who established our museum did so with a mission to commemorate, educate, and inspire future generations. Furthermore, they mandated that our museum should always be free to the public, making a Holocaust education accessible to everyone. Even though we're not able to be in our museum's physical space for the time being, we are still able to carry forward their mission. This morning, as I mentioned, you have the honor and privilege of listening to Engelina Billauer, who will share her story with you. And afterwards, you can type in questions in the Q&A box or the comments for those watching on Facebook, and Engelina will answer as many as possible. So on behalf of Holocaust Museum Los Angeles, I am so honored and happy to welcome Engelina Billauer. So thank you so much for being with us this morning, and you may start sharing your story with us.
Thank you to listen to my story. Unfortunately, there are too many survivors left. So it's very important that we tell our story and that it should never happen again to anybody. I was born in Berlin, Germany in 1927. My parents were handicapped. They couldn't speak and they couldn't hear, but they had 3 children and we all could hear and speak. I was the youngest, so I was lucky that my older siblings would teach me sign language. We lived in an apartment house. We were the only Jews, but we had no problems until 1933 when Hitler came to power. Then, of course, there were all kinds of new laws against us. We were forbidden for many things. And it became very, very difficult. In 1938, November 9th, the famous night of the burning of synagogues and burning all the religious items that were thrown in the street and set on fire. I started school in 1934, but I was the only Jew, and after 2 years I was thrown out anyway, and I was sent to a Jewish girls' school, which was a 45-minute walk. We were not allowed to use public transportation, so my mother would walk with me to school and pick me up in the afternoon. Across from our Jewish school was a regular public school. Those kids used to call us names, insult us. In the winter, they would cover rocks with snow and throw it at us. But we got used to that also. That went on until after Kristallnacht, November 9th, they closed all Jewish schools, and we all had to wear the yellow star. And that, of course, limited us for a lot of other things. But before that, I was blonde and blue-eyed, and Germans thought that Jews are dark-haired and big noses. So being blonde, I could get away with a couple of things. After Kristallnacht, when we had to wear the star, of course, that was the end of doing anything. In 1940, they started deportations. They picked up whole families in moving trucks and took them away. And later we found out that they were all sent to Poland and killed. Our turn was in 1942 in September. 2 Gestapo men came to our apartment, told us to take a few things and come with them. They took us by public transportation to one of the biggest synagogues in Berlin. The outside was standing, only the inside was destroyed. When we got there, we saw a lot of people there already sitting on their luggage. On the stage were the SS men sitting. And as soon as my sister and I came in, they called us and asked us, are you 100% Jewish? Maybe you have a relative that's not. But we said, no, we are 100% Jewish. So they sent us back in the audience. We were sitting all on our luggage for 3 days, people of all ages, children of all ages. After 3 days, they took 1,000 people marching through the city of Berlin to a railway station. The streets were full of Germans clapping, oh, we finally get rid of the Jews. They put us on a train and the train left. We had no idea where we were going. I was 15 years old, so my geography wasn't that great anyway. And on the train were only the SS men. The train only stopped for them to get food or water. We never got anything. After a certain while, people, the grown-ups said, oh, it looks like we're not going to Poland. Maybe that's a good sign. The train continued and finally stopped in Riga. Riga is the capital of Latvia. We knew that there was a ghetto, but the train stopped and they took out only 10 men, shot them right in front of us, and the train continued. On October 1st, 1942, the train stopped on an empty field in Estonia. We were chased off the train and told to stand in line. The head were the SS men and women, and they would decide. You go right, you go left. So when it came to us, they told my sister and me to go one side with maybe 200 other people, and the rest of them, they took away. We saw that our parents were taken on a bus, and we knew they don't understand what's going on. So we ran on the bus and we were sitting on the bus. The SS men followed us, started screaming. We told you have to stay behind, you have to clean the station. And we said, no, we have to be with our parents. And they said, oh, don't worry, you'll meet them later. But we never did. From the 1,000 people, they selected 200 to stay alive, and the rest of them were killed right away. But of course, we didn't realize it first. After we cleaned the station, we befriended 3 other girls who went through the same we did. And right away, we decided we stick together. So they marched us through empty fields. The weather was not bad yet, to our first camp. We were only women. Before we entered the building, the barracks, they would take jewelry from all the women. Now, many women didn't want to give their wedding bands, so they would put them on the side and shoot them right there. They led us into a barrack. There was nothing there, bare, nothing. And we were told to go to sleep on an empty, nothing there, no pillows, nothing. So, like my sister and the 3 girls decided we stick together to keep warm. In the morning, they would bring us water, and we were told to come outside, and they took us to another barrack where they had the clothes of all the people that they had arrested. We had to unpack and assort. Now, people had good stuff, even food, but you couldn't steal anything because when you left work, they checked. If you had something, they shoot you right on the spot. That went on until we had all the stuff cleaned out. And in the meantime, they always had us stand out and they take a few people away. First, of course, we didn't realize what they're doing, but it turned out that the people they took away, they were killed. After we had all the clothes sorted and all that, they took 100 women at night, put us on a bus, and drove us to Tallinn. Tallinn is the capital of Estonia. We arrived there in the middle of the night. We heard that we must be near the ocean because we heard the waves. And they took us into a real old-fashioned prison. So dark halls, until we came to a little more modern building. Everything was dark. We had to stand in line, 100 women. And then they would count 10, push you into a room until they had all 110 rooms. Then the lights went on and we saw we are in a prison cell. There were only 7 beds against the wall and we were 10. So we told the elderly ladies they have the beds and we sleep on the floor. In the morning, we had to come out and they gave us water and they told us to go down to the backyard. We got to the backyard, we saw a German civilian. He gave us a speech that he represents a construction company of Germany that we are going to work for them. We are going to get an extra soup. So they marched 100 women to the city of Tallinn to a shipyard. The shipyard was in bad shape. We assumed that the Germans and Russians had been fighting there. And we were told to clean up the shipyard. We did get an extra soup, and every morning we were taken out from the prison, and every late afternoon we were taken back. After we had the shipyard almost cleaned up, we were divided into groups. Some had to work for divers, some had to clean the ships nearby, all kinds of work. In my group, we were taught bricklaying. Now, each group was handled by a German civilian. Our group, the German man who was teaching us bricklaying, was the only German in all these years that we were imprisoned that was decent to us. After the war, when the state of Israel was declared, we recommended him and he was honored. Unfortunately, he didn't live to see it, but his family did. So we worked on that shipyard until it was almost good. And one day they didn't let us out of prison again. We never knew what the next step was. Again, they put us on a train and took us closer to the Russian border. Again, we were chased off the train, stand in line, and marched through big empty fields to a concentration camp. The concentration camp was already in existence. They were mostly Polish Jews and German Jews. We got there, the head was always SS men. This SS man would walk around with a stick, hit whoever crossed his way. We lived in a barrack, nothing, no beds or anything, all on the floor. We were sent out to do heavy work outside the camp, like shoveling snow, cutting trees in the woods. And many nights we came home, the men, the SS head wouldn't let us go to sleep. We had to stand around and the next morning go back to work. That went on for a while. Many evenings when we came home from work, they would pick a man or woman. We were men and women, but separated by a wire. And we would have to watch how they kill the person. And there was nothing we could do about it. We were in this camp for a while, for quite a while, and they decided they're going to build a new one, a smaller one nearby. So they picked us girls who were bricklayers and they marched us to another camp. It was brand new. We had to build the chimneys in the barracks, the fireplace for the SS where they lived, and then again, more people came, mostly Eastern Europeans. And again, we had to work hard, we were mistreated, We never had medical care. We never had enough food. It was hell, but there was nothing we could do about it. And like I said many times, when we had to stand outside to be counted, they would take people out to be killed. One time they picked me, and then they asked for volunteers. So of course my sister volunteered, and the 3 other girls we were very friendly by then, volunteered too, but for some miracle, I don't know how, the 5 of us were taken out and 5 other women were put in to be killed. That went on for months again, heavy work, no medical care. It's unbelievable how they treated us. They all had always German Shepherd dogs. Many times I saw how dogs killed people. I still nowadays don't like dogs, especially not German Shepherds. And that went on for a while. Apparently, the war became a little more critical for the Germans, so they decided to take us back to Germany. So again, they put us on the train, took us back to Tallinn. But they needed a ship for the German soldiers to go back, so they just dropped us off on an empty field right near the ship. There was nothing there, just a field and nothing, no blankets, nothing. We were just sleeping on an empty field. There were bombings, people got hurt, got killed. Finally, after 3 weeks, they loaded us on a ship. Of course, on the bottom, the Germans on top. Every day they would come down and look who had died. They took, or who was too sick, they thought wouldn't make the trip anyway. They took these bodies and threw them into the ocean. Finally, the ship stopped in a German town. We were unloaded from the big ship onto smaller little boats down the river to another big concentration camp, Stutthof. It was already filled, men and women always separated, the whole camp surrounded by electric wire. If you touched it, you killed yourself. Many people tried. And we came to that camp. The first thing they did was shave our heads and gave us rags to wear. We didn't have to work. We were just standing around all day. At night, they would push us into a barrack. But the barrack was too small for the women to sleep sitting down, never mind lying down. We had to teach ourselves to sleep standing up. Many nights they would come with cold water, throw it over us and tell us, that's your shower. Still wet. The next day we had to stand outside again all day. That went on for a couple of weeks. And they decided they're going to take us out from there and send us to Hamburg, Germany, to work in an ammunition factory. We knew that there was a big concentration camp in Hamburg, but for the factory it was not convenient. They built a smaller one near them. So we worked 12-hour shifts. Again, of course, all the time, we never had medical care. That went on for a while, and bombing started. We still had to go to the factory. But when the bombing became real heavy, they decided to give up this camp and take us to another concentration camp, which is better known, Bergen Belsen. When we arrived at the platform there, we saw that they brought people from all over, men. A lot of people had died. They were just lying around. And they marched us to the gates of Bergen Belsen. Germans, those little towns we went through, Germans looked, they didn't say anything. We came to the gates of Bergen Belsen. We were shocked. All concentration camps were bad, but we had never seen anything like that. Dead bodies all over the place. They put us into a barrack and they made us pick up dead bodies and put them into files. Again, we didn't get anything to eat or to drink. And the disease was overwhelming. A lot of people were dying. Luckily, on April 15th, 1945, the British Army entered the camp, told us that we are liberated, but they were not prepared for what they found, so they gave us army rations. Of course, people grabbed it and a lot of people couldn't take it. Like I said, thousands of people died while the British were there. The British finally realized that they have to give up that camp because it's full of typhus, poison, and whoever was capable, they took us nearby where they had stone buildings where probably the Germans had lived, and put us into these buildings, separating us by nationalities. Now, many people went back to the country they came from, but we knew that we will never stay in Germany. So we were in this in these caserns, and the British doctors went from room to room and looked who was sick. Now, in my room, I was sick, and one of my girlfriends. They put us in an ambulance, gave us a shower, hospital clothes, and put us in these buildings that they had made hospitals. My sister couldn't follow the ambulance, so she didn't know where I was. So she went from building to building until she found me, but I was too sick. They wouldn't let her in. After a couple of weeks, I got better. Girls in the room would push me against the window so my sister could see that I'm still alive. I got better. She came and she told the doctors that she's going to take me for a walk. She took me for a walk, never brought me back to the hospital. We went nearby where they had opened a displaced person camp. People from all over came to find somebody. We knew that that we didn't have to look for anybody because we knew that all our family members were killed. Among these people that came to look was a gentleman my sister knew from Berlin. He was always very active in Jewish organizations. He told us that he was in Auschwitz. See, all these years we didn't know about Auschwitz. We didn't know anything what's going on. He told us that he was in Auschwitz and that he was separated from his family. They were all gassed, and he and another few men were sent to camp near Auschwitz, Birkenau, to work in a factory that produced the gas for the gas chambers. After the war, he sued that company and he won. So my sister and him got to know each other. He became active, and we all knew that we want to leave Germany, but there was nobody yet to take us. So we decided we want to have a little more normal life for the time being. And my brother-in-law being active, we went to a small German town, Lübeck, and we built the synagogue that was there. Other survivors came. And one day an American soldier came and said, I have a busload of survivors, but we are leaving and the Russians taking over. And he thought it would be better to bring them to us, to the British zone. Of course, we agreed, and he brought a busload of survivors to us. They were all put up in big houses. We all celebrated any occasion. Among these men was a man from Warsaw, Poland, who later became my father-in-law. He was from Warsaw, Poland. He had a family and he had a jewelry store. In 1939, when the Germans invaded Poland, they went to his store. They beat him up. They stole his jewelry. And he told his son, his older son, I give you money, you try, save yourself, try to run away. So this young man ran away, ended up in Siberia. They had to work hard, but they didn't kill anybody. And all these years, he did not know what happened to his family. The Russians didn't tell them the war was over until 1946. He heard that his father had survived and lived in Germany. So he made his way to Germany. It wasn't easy then, but he made it. And he had a happy reunion with his father. He was told that his mother and the rest of the family were all killed in the Warsaw Ghetto. His father had remarried another survivor woman, and he lived with them. And again, we had everybody had parties, any occasions, we always got together. And he was a good dancer, so we always danced. He took me to the movies. I never went by myself. I always took somebody along. And we enjoyed freedom, but we all knew that we want to get out of Germany. In 1948, when the state of Israel was declared, they gave official papers. Now his father and his wife got the new papers. The son didn't get it because they said you can go illegal. So his father said, no, you wait till you get papers. So he moved into the house that the Germans had given us. And we started continuing dating. And on June 12, 1949, we got officially engaged. He knew that I would never separate from my sister and that her plans were to go to the United States. So no question that I go there too. So in 49, he said, you know, before we go to the United States, let us go and see my father and other family members that went to Israel much before. And we went to Israel in 1949. I can't describe the feeling you have after you survived the Holocaust, where you were treated like dirt. You arrive in a Jewish country. Everything is Jewish. They come and welcome you. It's an unbelievable good feeling. We lived with my father-in-law and his wife. My husband met all the relatives he hadn't seen in years. And it was time for us to go back to Germany. So my father-in-law said, you're here, you're going to the United States, at least let me make the wedding. And I said, I'm not getting married without my sister. She's the only one I have. And you know, then we didn't have little phones or anything, but they managed. And my sister, who had a baby by now, left the baby with somebody, came with her husband with a suitcase full of food and a wedding dress for me. On February 4th, 1950, we got married in Tel Aviv, Israel. And we had to go back to Germany. We went back to Germany and still there was nothing from the United States. So we decided we go one time back to Berlin. So my brother-in-law was from Berlin too. So we drove to Berlin. We went to the Jewish cemetery where my brother was buried. We had the names of our parents engraved in his stone so that at least their name is somewhere. And we drove to the apartment house we used to live. Now my sister refused. I went up and I saw the next door neighbor still the same. And she knew me since I was born, because then you were born in the house and not in the hospital. I rang her bell. She almost fainted when she saw me. I told her what her countrymen did, not only to my parents, but to 6 million other Jews. I got it off my chest. I went back down. We went back to the city we lived, waiting. Finally, we did get papers from the United States. By then, I had a baby. When my baby was 6 weeks old, we got a military plane to come to the United States. We arrived in New York in June, hot, humid. The immigration took care of us very fast. We came out and our friends who had come before were there to welcome us. They knew that we were supposed to go to Stockton, California, to the Jewish community They all said, why do you want to go there? You don't know anybody there. Stay here in New York and we will help. And we thought that was a good idea, and we decided we stay in New York. We moved with some survivors into the Bronx on the 4th floor, no elevator, no air condition, but we didn't know. We moved in there and my husband, the neighbors always were always very, very nice. And they arranged for my husband to get a job as a watchmaker. And finally, they also arranged for us to get an apartment. 1 bedroom on the ground floor. No kitchen. Only the wall in the living room had a stove and a refrigerator. So we lived in this 1 bedroom apartment. 3 weeks later, my sister came with her husband and 2 children. So we all lived in this little apartment. My husband worked as a watchmaker. My brother-in-law was advised to go back to school to learn to be an accountant. So the men were busy. My sister and I took care of the 3 children. And we were looking forward to live a normal life. One day my sister was invited to friends who had come before, and she came back and she said, oh, they live in Queens in an apartment house, in a house with a backyard. We said, yeah, that's very nice, but we have to wait till we can afford that. But the same American soldier who had helped us before and who was a lawyer by then said, that's a very good idea. He arranged for us to get a loan, and we got a house in Fresh Meadows, New York. All our friends thought, you're crazy. Who wants to move out there? Who will ever come to visit? Because you had to use the subway and the bus. But it didn't take long, and they all came to visit. Later on, some of them bought houses around us. Neighbors were always very nice. Every Jewish holiday, we were in a different home. And we had a great time. In 1956, my husband said, I think it's time we have a home of our own. So we moved into a house not too far away. And we were delighted. People contributed furniture, all kinds of stuff. Neighbors were always outstanding. And in May 11, on Mother's Day, I had another baby boy. My husband would work at home, and I would bring the repaired watches back to Manhattan to the family, to the factory. That went on for quite a while. Every Shabbat, we would be together with my sister and her family. And we were happy. My children went to public school, junior high school, high school. My older son decided he wants to take a summer course at UCLA. So we said, okay. He went to UCLA, he came back and he said, I like California. I want to move to California to continue school. And we said, no, you have to finish high school in New York, in college in New York first. He did. And after that, he got married much too early and left for California. My sister died in 1977 of a rare disease, scleroderma. And after she died, my younger son decided he wants to go to California too. So I knew the boys were always pretty close. So I drove with my younger son cross country to California, to LA. My older son already had a practice, chiropractic, and I delivered my younger son and knew he would take care of it. And I went back to New York. When I got back, we had a letter from our sons that we should come to California, that we should be together. And we realized they're right. We sold our business, we sold our home, and we went cross country to LA. We had a happy reunion, and my husband said, yeah, but what should I do now? Because actually, I don't want to be a watchmaker. So they said, oh, we took care of that. You can be our office manager, and mom can be the secretary. My husband said, I don't speak English. I have to call insurance companies. I have to talk to private patients. They said, don't worry. Insurance companies, their English is not that great. And the private patient will learn to understand. So we became part of their office for 26 years. We enjoyed, both my sons were married, both had two sons, all active in all kinds of sports. We went to any sport they participated in. And we had a wonderful time. We got our own home in Santa Monica, and we were really, really very happy living here. Like I said, they were all in sports. My second grandson, Jesse, came to the brand idea he wants to be a surfer. And we said, surfer, what kind of a sport is that? But he insisted. He became a champion surfer. He always went surfing before he went to school. And one day he went surfing and the wave hit him. He was floating in the ocean. The lifeguards fished him out, took him to the hospital. We were cold, and we were told that he broke his neck and that he will never walk again. Of course, we were all very upset. He was in a hospital and rehab. He finished high school. He went to college in San Diego, always with a caregiver. He came back and insisted he wants to surf again. We all thought he's out of his mind, but he started a foundation, Life Goes On, and a lot of people that are invalids, he has a lot of helpers. They bring people to the beach and help them to surf. By now, he's a champion surfer of handicapped people. Yeah, you get used to any situation, and we learned to live like that. His oldest grandson got married, lives in San Diego, and has 2 girls. Luckily, Jesse got married, found a girl, they fell in love, and they got married. We had a wonderful wedding. Unfortunately, 6 weeks after the wedding, my husband died of cancer. A week after he was buried, I had a stroke. So I was in the hospital and rehab, and they decided I can't live in my condo. They took me to a assisted living home. I went there and I lived there for a couple of years. Luckily, before all these things happened, my sons decided to take me out of that home, and I live with my older son in a home right next door to Jesse and his children. So I get to see them every day, enjoy them every day. And that's my life now. Unfortunately, the museums are all closed, so I don't have much of a chance to talk, but I guess they are so advanced now that I can talk on this. And I think that's all my time I have. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Angelina, for sharing your story with us. We do have some questions from the audience.
Sure.
And I would just like to say, Angelina has been speaking at our museum for a couple of years now. And, you know, fortunately, we're able to still do this. And even though we miss seeing you in person, of course, we're really grateful that we can do it this way. Hopefully sooner rather than later.
Yes, I hope so too.
Now, before we have some questions, but before we do, I would just like to quickly share with you this photo of Angelina's family.
They're cute. I'm the baby.
This is Angelina, her sister, her brother, and her parents. And this photo was presumably taken in Berlin and probably around
1927, when I was born.
Right. Yes, that makes sense. Okay, we do have some questions from the audience. Okay. What happened to your sister's family?
My sister's family. Her husband, who was very active, died. My sister died, and her son committed suicide. And my niece lives in New York or New Jersey.
Thank you for sharing. Have you seen any of the movies about the Holocaust, particularly Schindler's List and the series? And we have a couple of people who wanted to know if you think that those films are accurate in their portrayal of the Holocaust.
They're a little bit Hollywood added, but in general, they're okay.
Do you think that SS soldiers were following orders, or that they had an evil mindset, or what do you think about that?
No, I think they followed the orders.
Have you returned to since you first went?
To Berlin?
To Israel.
Oh, to Israel many times.
And let's see. Do you see, when you first started sharing your story with people, how did you feel talking about it after so many years? And did you feel that it was harder at first than it is now?
No, I'm always very open about it. I think people have to know because survivors are dying out.
And have you been back to Berlin or any of the camps that you were in on any of these programs or on your own?
I did go to Bergen Belsen, of course. I went to Dachau and I went to Neuengamme, which is by Hamburg. I did go back to Estonia because they built a monument over the mass graves. And I did go there once to say Kaddish.
You mentioned earlier that you had your, I believe you were talking about your brother-in-law's family having the parents' names inscribed on the headstone just because their name could be written somewhere.
Right.
Which is, of course, I think very profound. And since you mentioned that your parents perished in Estonia, is this something that you have done anywhere for your parents as well?
Of course.
Do you know what happened to the rest of your family, such as grandparents, aunts, uncles, or
I
cousins?
never knew my grandparents. I know my father's sisters, they all perished.
So you never had any extended relatives either before
No.
or after the Holocaust? Something that I find really interesting about your story is that your parents were deaf and
Yeah.
you learned sign language growing up. What did your parents do for work, and how did they manage to maintain an income being deaf?
My father was a, no, I can't think of the, not a, no, my mother was a dressmaker and my father was the opposite for men. No, I can. In German, it's a Schneider, but he was
A tailor?
tailor. See, he worked for people that he didn't have to talk.
Do you still remember language today?
No, I always watch when they have sign language. It's completely different.
Let's see, we have time for a few more questions. You have a couple of family photos. You have this photo of your family that I showed, as well as a
Yes.
few others of your parents. Do you remember
No.
how you managed to retrieve those photos afterwards?
One of my father's sisters went to Shanghai and she came back, she gave me that picture.
Very fortunate to have those.
Yes, I carry it with me all the time.
What gave you strength and how were you able to move forward?
First of all, I was young. And like I said before, my girlfriends and my sister, we were so close, we kept each other. We were all very different, but we kept each other moving.
Did your parents, to your knowledge, ever think about putting you and your sister on a kinder transport?
We didn't know anybody. No, we had no connection with anybody, so we didn't know. As a matter of fact, my brother-in-law, Norbert Wollheim, he was in charge of the Kindertransport, and he didn't send his own child.
This was your sister's husband,
Yes.
right? You didn't mention it this morning, I don't think, but in the past, you've told me about the synagogue that you went to in Berlin as a child. Can you talk about that synagogue?
Yes, there was a synagogue. There was a home for young people who couldn't speak in here. And we went to synagogue there. There was a rabbi who would speak to the speaking language, to the speaking audience, and sign language at the same time.
Did you maintain contact with the people who you were incarcerated with and who stayed with you throughout the Holocaust?
Unfortunately, they all passed away.
But you maintained contact with them afterwards, right?
Always.
We have a lot of people who were listening this morning who were just thanking you so much for sharing your story and telling you that your story and the way you tell it was so inspirational to them. And something I find particularly moving about your story is not only the way that you persevered, but that the way that your grandson ended up persevering and really moving forward.
He always says, yeah, he's strong like me, he said.
And I think, you know, it's just really profound that you were able to, your family just had this, I mean, you really were able to move forward and to persevere despite.
Yes, I'm very lucky.
And I know that when you come to the museum and speak, and when you're doing it here virtually, where people can watch you from all over the world, by the way, now, you really help people feel inspired to overcome their own hardship. This is part of the...
Because everybody should know what happened. And being anti-Semitism so big now, it's even more important to hear the story.
And so these are reasons why we have survivors speak on a regular basis. And Angelina, it's such an honor to have you as a part of our community, to be sharing your story. And we just thank you so much for...
And you know, I know one of the survivors who built this, Dr. Sachs.
Really? I didn't know you. Angelina is referring to Dr. Sherman Sachs, who was a veterinarian who was one of the survivors who founded our museum in the 1960s. I did not know that you knew him.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that.
You're very welcome. Anytime.
Of course. And again, our mission is to commemorate, educate, and inspire. And Angelina, this is what you help us do on a regular basis.
I'm glad I do it.
And I encourage everybody to visit our new website, holocaustmuseumla.org. Again, we have changed our name as of last week. Please visit our website and our Facebook page. We have survivors speak every Thursday at 11 o'clock. Thank you so much, everybody, for
you're very welcome. Have a good weekend.
So much, Angelina. Have a safe weekend, everybody. Stay cool to those.
Thank you.
Angelina, thank you very much.
Stay cool.
You too.